Welcome to our channel, where history's greatest mysteries unfold. Tonight, we journey to ancient Alexandria, where the world's most magnificent libraries once held the collective knowledge of civilization. What secrets were lost when these temples of learning vanished? How did scholars preserve humanity's wisdom against impossible odds? Join us as we uncover the forgotten guardians of ancient knowledge and their race against time. If you're ready to explore history's hidden treasures, hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating documentaries. Chapter 1: Dawn over the Harbor of Knowledge. As the first light of dawn touches the waters of the great harbor, Alexandria awakens to another day of infinite possibility. The gentle lapping of waves against limestone quays mingles with the distant calls of merchants preparing their wares, creating a symphony that has echoed across these waters for 3 centuries. This is the 3rd century before the Common Era, and you stand at the edge of the greatest confluence of knowledge the world has ever known. Breathe deeply, and let the salt-tinged air fill your lungs. The Mediterranean breeze carries with it something extraordinary: fragments of conversations in a dozen languages, the rustle of papyrus scrolls being carefully transported from ship to shore, and the quiet intensity of minds hungry for wisdom. This is Alexandria, the city that Alexander the Great dreamed into existence, now flourishing under the enlightened rule of the Ptolemaic dynasty. As your eyes adjust to the growing light, the magnificent Pharos lighthouse emerges from the morning mist, its beacon having guided ships safely through the night. But the true illumination of this city comes not from its lighthouse, but from the countless scrolls housed within its libraries. For Alexandria is more than a port, more than a capital, it is the beating heart of human learning. Follow the stone pathways that wind from the harbor toward the royal quarter, where the morning sun casts long shadows between towering columns. The soft whisper of leather sandals on marble creates a meditative rhythm as scholars and students make their way to the great Mausoleon, that sacred shrine of the muses where knowledge is both worshipped and created. Listen closely to the sounds that define this intellectual sanctuary. In the distance, the gentle scratching of reed pens against papyrus creates an almost musical backdrop, hundreds of grammatians working in the scriptoriums, their careful hands preserving the wisdom of ages. The soft thud of wooden scroll cases being opened and closed punctuates the morning air, while the whispered recitations of students memorizing epic verses drift from the covered walkways. The Ptolemies have created something unprecedented here. Their vision extends far beyond the famous library that draws scholars from across the known world. In every quarter of Alexandria, smaller libraries flourish like hidden gardens of learning. Temple scriptoriums dedicated to Serapis and the ancient Egyptian gods, house texts in hieroglyphic and demotic scripts alongside Greek treatises. Private collections in the homes of wealthy merchants contain scrolls that span continents and cultures, while specialized libraries serve the city's renowned schools of medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. As the golden Mediterranean light strengthens, it reveals the true scope of this intellectual empire. Papyrus, that precious gift of the Nile, flows through Alexandria's economy like lifeblood. The city's scribes work with an urgency born of divine mission, knowing that each scroll they copy might preserve knowledge that would otherwise vanish forever. In workshops filled with the sweet scent of newly made papyrus, translators labor to bridge the gaps between languages, ensuring that wisdom knows no boundaries. The Ptolemies' ambitious acquisition policies have transformed Alexandria into a vast magnet for learning. Every ship that enters this harbor carries not just goods and passengers, but scrolls that might contain lost epics, philosophical treatises, or scientific observations from distant lands. The bibliophiliacs, those dedicated library keepers, examine each text with the reverence of priests, understanding that they are the guardians of humanity's greatest treasures. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Alexandria's libraries is not what they contain, but what they create. This is not merely a warehouse of ancient knowledge, but a living laboratory where new ideas are born. In the covered colonnades of the Mouseion, scholars debate questions that will shape human understanding for millennia. The gentle murmur of philosophical discourse blends with the sound of styluses calculating mathematical proofs and the careful diction of poets crafting verses that will outlive empires. As you settle into this ancient world, let the rhythmic sounds of intellectual pursuit wash over you like a gentle tide. The soft unfurling of papyrus scrolls becomes your breathing. The distant harmony of recited poetry becomes your heartbeat. The whispered conversations of scholars sharing discoveries across cultural divides becomes the soundtrack to your dreams. Here, in the shadow of the Pharos, surrounded by the largest concentration of human knowledge ever assembled, Alexandria reveals its true nature. It is not just a city, but a promise that learning can transcend boundaries, that wisdom can survive the rise and fall of kingdoms, and that the patient work of preservation can grant immortality to the greatest achievements of the human spirit. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, you carry with you the eternal dawn of Alexandria, where knowledge itself was born anew each day. Chapter 2: The Great Library and Its Treasures. Dawn breaks over the marble columns of the Great Library, and already the Mouseion stirs with purposeful energy. This is no ordinary repository of scrolls, but the beating heart of human inquiry itself. Within these sacred halls dedicated to the Nine Muses, the greatest minds of the ancient world gather to push the boundaries of what mortals can know and understand. Listen to the animated discussions echoing through the covered walkways as scholars from distant lands share their discoveries. Here, beneath soaring colonnades that frame the brilliant Mediterranean sky, Eratosthenes of Cyrene paces thoughtfully, his mind wrestling with a question that has puzzled humanity since the dawn of consciousness: how large is our Earth? Watch as he unfurls a papyrus scroll covered with geometric calculations, his reed pen scratching precise measurements across the surface. Through ingenious observation of shadows cast in Alexandria and distant Syene, this remarkable man will calculate the Earth's circumference to within stunning accuracy using nothing more than mathematics, careful observation, and brilliant reasoning. The soft murmur of his explanations to gathered students mingles with the gentle rustle of papyrus as they eagerly copy his revolutionary methods. In another corner of this vast complex, Aristarchus of Samos stands in heated debate with fellow astronomers, his voice rising with passionate conviction as he proposes something almost heretical: that our Earth moves around the Sun, not the reverse. The controversial nature of his ideas only intensifies the scholarly discourse, as scribes hurriedly document these radical theories on precious vellum scrolls that will preserve his insights for future generations to rediscover. The library's acquisition methods reflect an almost insatiable hunger for knowledge that matches the energy of its scholars. Ships entering Alexandria's bustling harbor undergo thorough inspection, not just for taxable goods, but for scrolls and written materials of any kind. The Ptolemaic officials have established an unprecedented policy: every written work entering the city must be surrendered for copying. Professional scribes work day and night in dedicated scriptoriums, their reed pens dancing across fresh papyrus as they meticulously reproduce texts in multiple languages. The sounds of this intellectual enterprise create a symphony of learning. In the medical section, practitioners debate the revolutionary anatomical discoveries of Herophilus, whose detailed dissections have unlocked secrets of the human body. Their animated discussions about blood circulation and nervous systems blend with the careful recitation of Hippocratic texts being memorized by aspiring physicians. Mathematical discoveries echo through adjacent halls where the geometry of Euclid takes shape. Students gather around master geometers as they demonstrate propositions with compass and straightedge, each proof building upon previous knowledge like stones in an eternal monument to logical thinking. The precise terminology of mathematical discourse, axioms, theorems, corollaries, becomes a new language for describing reality with unprecedented accuracy. The library's true genius lies not merely in preservation, but in synthesis. Here, Egyptian astronomical knowledge recorded in hieroglyphic scrolls meets Babylonian mathematical techniques written in cuneiform on clay tablets. Greek philosophical treatises engage with Persian wisdom texts and Jewish scriptural commentaries. Teams of translator-scholars work tirelessly to bridge these diverse intellectual traditions, creating unprecedented cross-cultural understanding. In the specialized scriptoriums, master bibliophilics oversee the careful maintenance of hundreds of thousands of scrolls. The soft whisper of linen being wound around wooden cores mingles with the gentle application of cedar oil to protect precious papyri from insects and decay. Each scroll represents not just individual knowledge, but humanity's collective memory being actively preserved for future generations. The medical library pulses with particular energy as physicians document groundbreaking surgical techniques and pharmaceutical discoveries. The scratch of styluses recording detailed anatomical observations creates a steady rhythm as medical knowledge expands exponentially through systematic documentation and scholarly collaboration. As evening approaches and oil lamps begin to flicker throughout the complex, the scholarly activity continues unabated. In pools of golden lamplight, astronomers refine celestial calculations while mathematicians pursue the elegant relationships between numbers that will become foundations for future scientific advancement. The Great Library represents humanity's boldest experiment, the systematic collection, preservation, and advancement of all human knowledge within a single institution. Here, individual brilliance combines with collaborative scholarship to create discoveries that will echo through millennia. As you absorb the intellectual energy of this remarkable place, let the gentle sounds of scholarly pursuit guide you toward rest. The soft unfurling of papyrus becomes your breathing rhythm. The distant murmur of academic discourse becomes your lullaby. The patient work of preservation and discovery continues through the night, ensuring that wisdom itself never sleeps. In Alexandria's great library, human knowledge finds its most magnificent expression, creating treasures more valuable than gold, more lasting than empires. Yet even the mightiest institutions yield to the inexorable passage of time. As centuries unfold, the golden age of Alexandria's libraries begins its slow, melancholic fade into twilight. The first shadows fall during the Roman conquest of 30 BCE. While Roman administrators initially respect the scholarly traditions, the Ptolemaic system of royal patronage that sustained these vast collections gradually withers. The bibliophilics find their budgets reduced, their acquisition programs curtailed. The steady stream of international scholars seeking residency at the Mouseion slows to a trickle. Political upheaval creates deeper wounds. During the Jewish revolt of 115 CE, flames consume entire districts of Alexandria, claiming countless private libraries and scriptoriums. The Serapeum suffers damage, its precious medical and astronomical collections partially scattered. The scratch of reed pens grows quieter as fewer scribes labor to replace lost scrolls. Religious transformation brings profound changes to Alexandria's intellectual landscape. As Christianity spreads through the empire, the ancient pagan learning housed in temple libraries faces growing hostility. The worship of Thoth and the Muses gives way to new priorities. Some Christian scholars embrace the preservation of classical texts, recognizing their value, but others view pagan philosophy with deep suspicion. The destruction of the Serapeum in 391 CE marks a symbolic moment in this gradual decline. The Great Temple Library, once second only to the Mouseion itself, falls to religious zealots. Centuries of accumulated scrolls, mathematical treatises, astronomical observations, medical knowledge disappear forever. The building's marble columns echo with silence where once scholarly debates flourished. Yet the true story of Alexandria's decline lies not in dramatic destruction but in slow dispersion. As political instability increases and imperial support wanes, scholars begin migrating to other centers of learning. Constantinople beckons with imperial patronage. Damascus and Baghdad emerge as new intellectual hubs. The precious scrolls travel with departing scholars, scattered like seeds on the wind. The papyrus industry itself faces challenges. Trade disruptions affect the supply of raw materials. The laborious process of scroll production becomes increasingly expensive as economic pressures mount. Parchment, more durable but costlier, gradually replaces papyrus for the most important texts, but the overall volume of copying diminishes. Private libraries suffer particularly as wealthy families face economic hardship. The merchant princes who once competed to assemble impressive collections find their fortunes reduced by changing trade patterns. Their scriptoriums close, their personal libraries sold or abandoned. Knowledge that took generations to accumulate disperses in mere decades. Some attempts at preservation continue. Dedicated scholars work tirelessly to copy the most essential texts, prioritizing works they deem most crucial for posterity. Christian scriptoriums focus on theological works and selected classical authors deemed compatible with their faith. The steady scratch of copying continues, but at a fraction of its former intensity. The rise of monasticism creates new centers of learning, but these institutions operate under different principles than the old Alexandrian libraries. Monks preserve knowledge selectively, emphasizing spiritual education over comprehensive collection. The universal aspiration that once drove Alexandria's scholars gives way to more focused, religious priorities. Arab scholars arriving with the conquest of 641 CE discover libraries already much diminished from their classical glory. Yet these new custodians often prove sympathetic to learning, working to translate and preserve remaining Greek texts. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad becomes heir to some of Alexandria's intellectual traditions, though the seamless continuity is forever broken. In the quiet corners of Alexandria, remnants of the old learning persist. A few private collectors maintain small libraries. Christian scholars preserve selected classical works. The tradition of scholarship continues, though in fragments rather than the grand systematic approach that once defined the city. The great scriptoriums fall silent one by one. The collaborative networks of scholars who once corresponded across the Mediterranean dissolve. The systematic acquisition programs that brought knowledge from every corner of the known world become memories recorded in administrative papyri that themselves crumble with age. As night descends over late antique Alexandria, the soft rustle of scrolls grows ever fainter. The oil lamps that once burned in countless reading rooms are extinguished. The gentle murmur of scholarly discourse fades to whispers, then silence. Yet in this twilight, a profound truth emerges. Knowledge, like water, finds ways to flow around obstacles. Though Alexandria's libraries declined, their intellectual treasures dispersed to new guardians across the Mediterranean world. In Baghdad and Constantinople, in monastery scriptoriums and private collections, the precious learning continues its quiet migration through human history. The scratching of reed pens may have stilled in Alexandria, but elsewhere, new scribes take up the eternal task of preservation. Chapter 4: Echoes in the Silence. In the gentle darkness that follows memory, we find ourselves walking through Alexandria's empty streets, where moonlight touches the remnants of what once was the world's greatest repository of human knowledge. The harbor waters lap quietly against ancient stones, carrying whispers of conversations held between scholars who debated the movements of stars, the nature of the soul, and the mysteries of mathematics centuries ago. Tonight, as we drift toward sleep, let us consider what remains when great institutions fade into history. The libraries of Alexandria were never truly lost, they transformed, scattered like seeds on Mediterranean winds, taking root in distant scriptoriums and private collections across the known world. Each papyrus that survived carried within its fibers the dreams of the Ptolemaic vision, that all human knowledge could be gathered, preserved, and shared across generations. Picture the last bibliophilax walking through the dimmed halls of the Serapeum, his sandals soft against marble floors worn smooth by countless scholarly footsteps. Oil lamps flicker in their bronze holders, casting dancing shadows on walls lined with empty scroll niches. He pauses at a reading table where a single papyrus remains, its edges golden in the lamplight. Perhaps it contains fragments of Sappho's poetry, or calculations from Aristarchus about the size of the sun, or medical observations from physicians whose names have long been forgotten. This keeper of books understands something profound as he gently rolls the papyrus and places it in its cedar case. Knowledge is not truly preserved in buildings or institutions, but in the careful transmission from one mind to another, one generation to the next. The great libraries were never monuments to permanence, but rather waystations in an endless journey of human curiosity and learning. Listen to the quiet breathing of the city at rest. In scattered homes across Alexandria, private collectors still maintain their modest libraries. Christian scholars work by lamplight, carefully copying selected works of classical learning that they deem worthy of preservation. Jewish scribes continue their ancient traditions of textual transmission. Even as the grand collaborative networks dissolve, individual threads of knowledge persist, woven into the fabric of daily life. The wisdom of Alexandria flows onward like the Nile itself, sometimes underground, sometimes emerging into daylight in unexpected places. In a monastery scriptorium in distant Ireland, a monk copies Euclidean geometry. In Baghdad, scholars translate Ptolemy's astronomical observations into Arabic. In Constantinople, philosophers debate questions first posed in Alexandria's lecture halls centuries earlier. Each copy made, each translation completed, each student taught represents a small victory against forgetting. The Grammateus, who spent his life transcribing scrolls, working with reed pen and lamp-black ink, could never have imagined how far his careful letters would travel through time. His work becomes a bridge spanning centuries, connecting ancient wisdom to future seekers. As sleep approaches, feel the gentle rhythm of this eternal preservation. Somewhere tonight, someone reads by flickering light, absorbing knowledge first recorded on papyrus in ancient Alexandria. The chain of learning remains unbroken, though it has grown longer and more complex, stretching across continents and cultures in ways the Ptolemaic scholars never envisioned. The forgotten libraries of Alexandria teach us that true preservation happens not through grand institutions alone, but through the quiet dedication of countless individuals who understand that knowledge is humanity's most precious inheritance. Each time someone copies a text, translates a passage, or teaches a concept to another person, they participate in the same sacred work that once filled Alexandria's scriptoriums. Rest now in the knowledge that wisdom endures. Though the great Mouseion stands empty and the Serapeum's scrolls have turned to dust, the essential spirit of Alexandria's quest continues. In libraries and schools, in books and digital files, in the conversations between teachers and students, the ancient dream persists, that human knowledge can be gathered, preserved, and shared across the vast expanses of time and space. The Mediterranean waves that once brought scholars to Alexandria's harbor still carry stories on their gentle rhythm. Let their soft murmur lull you toward sleep, knowing that every question you've ever asked, every fact you've ever learned, connects you to those ancient seekers who first lit their oil lamps against the darkness and began the never-ending work of understanding our world. In dreams, perhaps, we might glimpse the true library of Alexandria, not lost, but transformed, living on in every mind that seeks to know and preserve the precious accumulation of human wisdom.